Chapter 27. Dougie. Dougie pulled into Holly's drive, surprised to see another vehicle there, especially one he didn't recognize. Though he knew Holly was probably fine, he couldn't help the anxious feeling that coursed through his veins as he turned off his car. His hand instinctively fell to his gun as he walked to her door. It swung open just as he raised his hand to ring the bell, and he found himself staring at a woman with blonde hair pulled into a bun. A bright red lipstick colored her lips and brought attention to the mole on the right side of her cheek. Something about her felt familiar, but Dougie couldn't place what it was. "Oh, I'm sorry," she said, her hand flying to her chest as if he'd scared her and should be the one apologizing. Her eyes widened as they scanned his frame and landed on his gun. "Is there a problem, officer?"
"That depends on who you are and where Holly is."
Dougie kept his tone even, but little warning signs were going off in the back of his head, though he wasn't sure why. "I'm right here, Dougie." Holly appeared behind the blonde and shook her head at him. "Simmer down. This is Sylvia Mason. She's a lawyer, and she was just helping me with the insurance claim for the restaurant."
Sylvia Mason. Why did that name sound familiar? Wait, aren't you the woman who called out the names at the Valentine's dance?
The wary expression left the woman's face, and she smiled. "Yes, I run the legal aid office in town, but I also work with the foster care system and run their charities. I'm surprised you remember."
He was surprised he'd forgotten. It had been her hand that had pulled out Frederick's name with Holly's instead of his own. But he shouldn't hold that against her. "Good memory," he said, tapping his head. "But what's this about you helping with Holly's insurance claim?"
She waved a hand to indicate it was no big deal. "It's nothing, really. They're dragging their feet about issuing the claim check, even though Holly is not a suspect in the arson. So I'm just going to see if I can get them to respond with a little more haste. Sometimes just the word lawyer makes things move a little quicker."
"That's nice of you, but what do you get in return?"
"Dougie," Holly gasped. Sylvia chuckled and waved a hand at Holly. "No, it's fine. I understand his concern. You've been through a lot, and he just wants to make sure I'm not taking advantage of you." She smiled at Dougie, but it was not exactly a warm smile. "I promise you, officer, that I have no intention of doing that. My fee is a very small percentage of the recovery, paid only if I am successful. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have some foster kid issues to take care of." With that, she skirted past Dougie, careful not to touch him in any way, and hurried to her car. "I can't believe you did that," Holly said, the anger evident in her cool tone, even though she stepped back to allow him entry.
"I'm sorry, but she's right. I am just looking out for you."
Dougie knew he had probably stepped over a line, but he couldn't help the protective feeling he felt for Holly. She'd been through so much.
"Are you sure you can trust her? Or that you even need her? How long could the insurance company really take?"
Holly shut the door inside. "Yes, I'm sure I can trust her. Not only does she do amazing charity work, but Tiffany has been working with her for the last several months on foster care issues, and she trusts her. Do I need her? I don't know. But the insurance company is dragging their feet, and my money is running out. If she can help me get it sooner, then it might be worth it."
"Okay, if you're sure."
Dougie would put on a supportive front, but he made a mental note to do a little research on Sylvia Mason tomorrow. "I am. Now, where are we going today?" The smile she flashed let him know he was forgiven, but he'd have to be more careful not to step on her independence in the future.
"You'll have to wait and see."
"Are you sure you can't give me a little hint? I want to make sure I'm dressed okay." She glanced down at her jeans and sweater. Not only was she dressed fine for what he had in mind, but Dougie thought she was even more beautiful in her casual attire than the skirts and shirts she wore to work. There was something sexy about seeing a woman comfortable.
He shook his head, his eyes twinkling as he stepped closer and wrapped his arms around her.
Nope, you're dressed fine for where we're going.
She smiled up at him, her hands sliding up his chest to his shoulders. Okay, you've got me curious now. He moved one hand to stroke her cheek.
Curiosity is fun. It keeps you guessing.
He lowered his face until his lips were inches from her. Every fiber of his being wanted to move another inch to claim her lips, but he waited, teasing her. And then she closed the distance, brushing her lips as lightly as a feather across his before pulling back and smiling. You're right, that was fun. She stepped out of his embrace to grab her purse and a jacket. You coming? Dougie grinned as he followed her to the car. He was glad she appeared lighter today, and it almost kept him from asking his next question. But he had to know.
Have you heard anything about the investigation?
Not much. Officer Shelby called me to let me know they didn't think it was the woman who took the picture. She seems to have an alibi. They're looking into any of her known associates, but I have a feeling it's a little like looking for a needle in a haystack. Dougie had no doubt about that. Though he couldn't be part of the active investigation, he listened to all he could, and he'd done a little research on his own. On Frederick. Unfortunately, the man had seemed to disappear after he left Courage.
Don't worry, they won't give up.
Holly nodded, but he could tell she was ready to change the subject. Silence filled the air until he pulled up in front of the town gazebo. He had it decked out with white lights, and a table had been set up inside. Holly's gasp told him he'd done good. You did all this? Dougie smiled at her and grabbed her hand.
I've wanted to take you out for a while, so I've had plenty of time to think of things I hoped would be amazing.
Holly turned to look at him. Dougie, I'm so sorry. He shook his head.
Nope, no apologies tonight. Timing was in God's hands, not ours, so there's nothing to be sorry about. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm famished, so shall we?
But there's no food, she said, looking back toward the table that, while beautifully set, was empty.
Oh, but there is.
Dougie stepped out of the car, but only far enough to open the back door and grab a basket from the seat.
I would never show up empty-handed. The chef at the resort informed me this is one of his best dishes.
You are amazing. He took her hand as they walked to the gazebo, and then he opened the basket and laid out the food. Holly was a trained chef and had high standards of food, and he hoped the dishes from the resort would not disappoint. Do you miss working at the resort? Holly asked as she scooped up some of the beef and rice.
Sometimes I do, but I feel like I'm making a bigger difference on the police force, so I'm okay with it.
He did miss the camaraderie he had with everyone at the resort, but he figured that would come in time at the station. He was still new, and the other officers were getting used to him. Well, I think that calls for a toast then. Holly picked up her glass and held it out to clink with his. Thank you for tonight, and for everything, Holly said, before tipping back the glass. I hope we'll have more nights like this. Dougie's smile lit up his face.
You read my mind. How does tomorrow night sound?
A laugh spilled out of Holly's lips so quickly that she covered her mouth with her hand, as if afraid she might spit some liquid out. You don't waste any time, do you?
I think I've wasted enough time. I know what I want, and this time I'm not going to let it slip through my fingers.
His fingers found hers across the table, and he opened his mouth to tell her how much he cared about her. But a movement behind her grabbed his attention and shattered the moment. He stood up, trying to get a better view, but there was a gasp, and then the figure was running. What is it? She asked, her voice threaded with fear.
I'm not sure yet. Stay here.
He hurried out of the gazebo and after the fleeing form.
Stop, he yelled. I'm not going to hurt you. I just want to talk to you.
The figure turned, and, realizing he was going to catch up anyway, slowed. Her face came into view, and Dougie pulled up short.
Mandy?
What are you doing spying on us?
He didn't know the new employee of Becca's well, but she certainly didn't seem dangerous. I'm sorry, she said. I wasn't meaning to spy. I just want to know more about her.
Holly?
Dougie glanced back to the gazebo. He could just barely make out Holly in the entrance.
Why?
Mandy bit her lip and her eyes dropped to the ground. Because she's my sister.